levels of
I
government
appreciate,
to help.
I do appreciate that. But our phones are ringing off the hook by people that can't get through these programs because of the inflexibility, because of the flawed design on some of the programs, and it's overwhelming, and people are losing their livelihood. So there's that. And as an accounting firm, you can see the CEBA loan. It's due next year, at the end of next year. Do you think that's reasonable? People are going to pay back this large amount of money, suffering the losses that they've incurred by the end of next year. I mean, these are small enterprises, most of them. Usually it takes 3 to 5 years to typically pay back a loan like this.
Yeah, there's no question. We're not here today to get into policies. We wanted to talk about Qs and the SIRS program, but I think the more flexibility and support that the government can give small and medium-sized businesses, I think that's just really important right now. And Tara, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add.
I think that's good, actually. I'm going to go to Ms. DeMarsh. Ms. DeMarsh, in the Northwest Territories, like on Vancouver Island, I was talking to Don Travers and Caddy Martini, who own a whale watch company, and they're saying if the wage subsidy isn't extended throughout the summer or the rent program, it's going to impact and wipe out a lot of businesses that rely on international travel. We know international travel is not going to bounce back this summer. Can you talk about how this is going to impact visitors in the Northwest Territories, because you heavily rely on international travel and having that certain over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, our border's closed, and we're looking at, a border not even being open until potentially the fall time, if then. So without the supports, our businesses will not remain. They literally, without the supports, we won't have the businesses around once the travel comes back around. So, regardless of what's going on in the rest of the country, we know for sure we're not going to be having visitors here till at least the fall time. So we've got another season. This is the second season for some of our operators. Some of them that operate summer and winter, this is their third season with no income. So without those supports in place, they will close their doors.
Last question.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So the last question then I'll go to is around, you talked about Destination Canada, and I think about how important they are, and also ITAC, Indigenous Tourism Association Canada, who just learned that they're getting an 83% cut on their core funding. They're told to wait to look to budget. Well, I got a note from Keith Henry, and he's not only worried about when the budget's going to be released, but they're trying to hold the industry together and with duct tape at this point, and people are leaving because there's no certainty in their jobs at that organization. Can you talk about how important that organization is, and also if you think it would be irresponsible to have an election in the middle of all of this uncertainty?
A reset of where we're at. There has been a concern over on the opposition side that there is some sort of a cover-up or some hiding in documents that, in redacted documents that have been submitted. And then on our
Ms. Morton, you said that you always sent correspondence to Mr. Kielburger for his review before sending it out. So when you sent the message, "Hello, Ben, thank you for your kindness in helping shape our latest program with the government, warmly, Craig," to Mr. Kielburger, did he object to that wording going to Mr. Chin?
As I mentioned in my statement that I read, I don't recall the details or specifics of sending this message.
So you don't remember sending the message?
There was 100 plus of them. So no, I don't remember the specific one.
You just don't remember sending it?
Correct.
Okay. And did you send messages to any other members of the government, staff, bureaucrats, politicians among those 100?
I can't recall like the names that were specifically on that list, but I do remember that there were other government people within the 100. I don't know if they were staffers or not.
And did you thank any of them for shaping the program?
That's where we get into my memory from a year ago. We're relying on my memory here. So.
Right. And but Craig did, when he looked at the message that you proposed to send to Mr. Chin, he didn't have any objections? You don't remember any objections on his part?
I don't recall any objections on his part. I also said that I don't know if he always reviewed it.
So you would send things with his name on them without him even knowing what the words were?
That has happened on occasion, yes.
Okay. And how did you know that Ben Chin helped shape the Canada Student Service grant?
I wouldn't have had visibility into that.
But how did you know?
Well, similar to the conversation we were having with Jensen, Ms. Jensen, I would put together the best information that I could with the information I had available, making assumptions as I go.
You're right.
But again, I didn't have visibility into that sort of thing.
But you
Craig would
did.
think.
Did you write the words, hello, Ben, thank you for your kindness in helping shape our latest program with the government? Did you write those words?
Once again, asking me the same question in a different way doesn't really refresh the memory at all.
But okay, but Craig is claiming that you did send it, and now you're saying you can't remember if you sent it.
Because then I wouldn't be relying on my explicit memory of exactly where I was, when I was, what my thought process was in sending that message. And
but you did
sending
send the
100
message
a year ago.
Sorry, I'm just not clear. You did send it, or you don't know if you sent it? Where are we at?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay, so Craig says you sent it. You now say you don't remember. Okay, that's interesting. You said that you relied on the database, email correspondence and calendars to piece together the puzzles that helped you write this message that you now say you can't remember writing. Was Mr. Chin in the We Charity database?
I don't recall what the process was for this specific one.
But was he in Mr. Kielburger's calendar?
No. Well, okay, so I can't say yes or no because I can't remember his calendar from a year ago. If he was in the calendar, chances are I would have written something like, "Hi Ben, thanks. Fantastic. Look forward to getting to work. Warmly,
Okay,
Craig."
that's interesting. So that's an interesting call. We didn't know that call had happened.
That wasn't a call. That was an example.
Okay, so it wasn't a call. It was just an example of a call that didn't happen. Okay.
I am going to interrupt here, Pierre, for a minute, because I want it to be clear that Ms. Morton said that was an example. She is not saying that call was made if Mr. Chin was in the database. Just to be clear.
All right,
I'll not take the time from you. The floor is yours.
It is just a little bit strange that we're hearing that the email Miss Morton said that she wrote and now says she doesn't know if she wrote, said that if she had wrote it, it might have been the result of a call that might have happened, but in this case didn't.
Last question.
Have you spoken with any member of the We Charity since the Kielburgers last testified at the Ethics Committee in March?
This March, yes.
Have you been getting assistance with your testimony from them or any of their representatives?
On the day after his testimony, he called me to check in. He broadly sort of offered me support, but I wanted to maintain my independence, and these words are all my own.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. We will go to Ms. Zerowitz, who will be followed by Mr. St. Marie. Julie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank everyone for their presentations. I actually want to go to three of our witnesses, but I'm going to start off just very quickly, Ms. Morton, just with you. I just want for the record, one, thanks so much for reading out your testimony. It was very helpful. It was also very consistent with what Mr. Kielburger had indicated when he came in. Mr. Craig Kielburger mentioned when he came before us, where he said, sure, I sent 100 messages because I only had 8 people on LinkedIn before that. That day, 100 messages went out. My executive assistant sent them to people to join on LinkedIn, and he was one of them. And you had indicated that part of your responsibility in his office was particularly in building up LinkedIn. So I appreciate that. And I'll just go very quickly to sort of maybe one more small thing. In my office, I have my staff that do my social media. They're very helpful. They often will have a running list of all the social media that they're working on. They'll send it to me for any comments.
There seems to be a confusion between. Well,
Have you been in contact with We Charity lawyers or lawyers paid by We Charity since Mr. Kielburger's testimony in March?
The first part of your question, I couldn't hear you for. Can you repeat?
Have you been in contact with lawyers paid by the We Charity since Mr. Kielburger's testimony in March?
I had about a 5-minute call with one of them.
Okay, and have they offered to provide you with legal assistance over at the We Charity for your testimony?
They generically offered me support, to which I didn't accept. I wanted my autonomy, and they respected that.
So, and you just spoke to the one of their lawyers once since that testimony?
I've had a couple conversations with various people within the organization. I don't know their connection to We or to anybody else.
Right. Sorry, within which organization then?
That information I'm not familiar with.
Sorry, I'm a little. You said you were in contact with several people within that organization. I asked which organization, and now you're saying you're not familiar with which organization you were referring to. Can you clarify which organization?
I'm not sure what connection everybody has to the organization at this point. I don't know who's a lawyer of We, who's a lawyer of Craig, who's a lawyer of.
Okay,
this is a web that I'm not familiar with.
So this web that you've been in contact with from We, are they're lawyers for Craig or Mark or We? You don't know. You just don't know which part of the web they work for.
I wouldn't have visibility to that.
Okay, but it is a web. So when you say web, you mean people have called you from We since he testified?
Yeah, there's been the lawyer that I had the conversation with.
And have they been? Have you been offered any other employment or contractual opportunities at We since you left?
Last question, Pierre.
I have not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do I have one last question?
Very quick one.
Are you aware of any contact between Mr. Kielburger and Margaret Trudeau, Sophie Trudeau, Katie Telford, Rick Thies, or Bill Morneau between the months March and end of June 2020?
I have no visibility into that.
Prime Minister tell Canadians if he's expecting a reduced or zero shipment from Moderna on the week of February 22nd?
It was going to be a massive challenge for companies around the world to develop and produce a vaccine that didn't exist yet when we were signing these contracts last summer. That's why we signed so many different contracts for so many potential doses for Canadians to ensure that we would be able to get Canadians vaccinated regardless of challenges or, yes, fluctuations in the week-to-week delivery.
Mr. Poilievre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siddell, for your service to the country. I know you've worked extremely hard. And politics aside, you've made great sacrifices doing your job, and I hope you have health and happiness in the next phase of your life. On the issue of Canada's housing market, you said that you were wrong to predict housing prices would drop between 8 and 16%. I'm not sure you were wrong. I think you might have been early. I think there is another chapter to unfold in this story. As your data has shown, for a house to be affordable, it shouldn't. The monthly payments on it should not consume more than 30% of pre-tax income. Right now, the average house costs the average family 50% of pre-tax income. That's 2/3. That means that for the average family, the average house is 2/3 more expensive than they can afford. We have Vancouver is the second most expensive housing market in the world behind Hong Kong, and Toronto is number 6 when you compare average income to average house price. And housing prices rose record levels last year in a time when immigration was down and GDP fell by $120 billion. None of this making any sense whatsoever. That said, there are causes driven by the federal government that explain some of the story. And the one, of course, is that the Bank of Canada is printing money, pumping it into the financial system, and it's being lent out and driving up demand. But CMHC has a role here as well. You, as a mortgage insurer, are taking the risk off the lender and putting them on the taxpayer, which creates a distortion that separates risk from return. And anybody who can earn a return without a risk is going to engage heavily in the activity that produces that return. What is the total dollar value of all the mortgage debt in Canada that CMHC insures, not just through portfolio and transaction insurance, but through other securitization and Canada mortgage bond products? The total dollar value.
That, if you'd give me a moment, I will try and I don't have that at my fingertips, but I will get it for you shortly if I may.
Sure.
Perhaps
Yes.
In response to another question.
Yes, that would be just fine. What is clear, though, is that banks are overwhelmingly, instead of using covered bonds, which are basically backed up by solid and excessive collateral, they are using government-backed insurance, either by having their customers pay for it up front or by bundling up all their mortgages and getting an insurance stamp from you or Genworth and Canada Guarantee. But they are not, they are choosing to use government-backed insurance instead of using collateral. Do you not believe that this is creating a major distortion in our housing system, which allows the banks to have the profit and the taxpayers to have the risk, and housing prices to skyrocket as a result?
I don't quite agree, and thank you for your comments up front about my service. The politics aside reference I smirked at because, of course, I've served you, sir, as minister, and
Yes,
and the current Liberal government as well, proudly, I should say. The mortgage insurance is required by the Bank Act, and so it's mandated by Parliament, not by CMHC. I will say that CMHC makes a significant amount of profit, or in the neighborhood of $1 billion or so a year off this business, which then is returned to the federal treasury.
well, there's no doubt about that. The government's making lots of short-term profit, but if housing prices do drop, as you have predicted they will, and people default on their mortgages, there will be mortgage defaults, and then all of a sudden, taxpayers will be losing money paying out that default insurance to the banks and other lenders. How much do you think we could end up paying out to those who are insured by these products?
We run stress tests every year outlining a range of scenarios. We, of course, retain capital for the purposes of that, as do the other mortgage insurers. And the private mortgage insurers, in addition, have equity capital, private equity capital ahead of them. All of that is absorbed before the government would have to pay on its guarantee. And we are satisfied in our significant stress testing, which involves scenarios that are wildly more pessimistic than anything I forecasted, that we have sufficient capital on hand. OSFI regulates and oversees the other mortgage insurers, and I'm sure has satisfied themselves of the same of those two businesses.
How much have you set aside?
Our capital, it's in the many billions of dollars. Right now, I think we have around $16 billion of capital. There's also something called insurance for business losses not yet recorded. There's a couple of categories, but it's many billions of dollars.
Right. Well, I suggest you set aside.
Last question, Pierre.
I suggest you set aside many more billions of dollars, because when interest rates rise back to normal levels, trouble this way comes. And I hope that we have the many billions of dollars set aside to pay for the resulting damage. In conclusion, do you think it is fair that we have a system where the bankers get the profits, the home buyer gets the costs, and the taxpayers get all the risk?
Well, I don't think the taxpayers do get all the risk, as I said to you. By the way, in response to your prior question, mortgage insurance, we have $438 billion of those on our books, and mortgage funding or securitization is about $500 billion. That, by the way, has the credit support before it of mortgage insurance, and so our risk there is actually only the timely payment guarantee between a default and our recovery on the insurance. So it's not quite additive.
So just to Mr. Chair, if I could just conclude on that clarification. So you said you have $500 billion.
$500 billion, yep.
And that is that account
of securitization timely payment guarantee through CMHC.
right. And
That would have behind it, I'm sorry to overtalk you,
Yeah.
would have behind it insurance for the credit
Right.
exposure.
So there's some double counting, understandably.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're talking over $500 billion that taxpayers are on the hook for, could be on the hook for in the event of mass mortgage default loss.
Could be, although I do want to reassure committee members that we are very confident through our stress testing that we have sufficient capital on hand to absorb any most foreseeable losses, any foreseeable
Okay.
losses.
Pray that you're right.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good day.